was it to be faithful to Dick's novel?
Well, you know, I'm a producer and a screenwriter primarily, and I work on mostly big movies, which never get made, because they're so difficult to get a green light on, as we call it, to actually get funding for a $30, $40, $50, $100 million movie. I've written 50 drafts of Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said, working with half a dozen really good directors and a handful of big stars, and we still haven't gotten it made, although I've gotten paid over the years, which is why I'm able to spend 4 years making this for no pay. I didn't have to compromise the material. Usually when you make an indie movie of a certain level, your budget is determined by the stars you have in the movie. And I knew I didn't really want big name actors for this movie. And we made it for absolutely the minimal amount of money we could, rather than more, because had we made it for more, we would have had to have a foreign sales company give us estimates against stars, and they would have wanted it to be an action movie. They would have wanted fights and explosions and ray guns and all of the tropes of science fiction, rather than this kind of science fiction. And I didn't see any point in making the movie that way, a movie that was from material so important to Dick. So I was the final arbiter. We said Philip K. Dick is the star. At what budget are we comfortable making a movie where the star is the writer? And that was the budget we made it at, and hope to make our money back, though that's gotten much more difficult since we began because of the economy and what's happened in the movie business. So the faithfulness was really up to me. Nobody made me change anything or do anything. I was only limited by what I wanted to do. I changed a few things from the novel, but most people, even scholars who specialize in Philip K. Dick, have really embraced the movie as being faithful and true in spirit, because the things I changed were small things. In the book, they're much older, the characters. They're like in their 40s, late 40s, Rachel and Nick and Phil. And I just never saw it that way. I saw them as young, as idealistic. And so I wrote it that way. In the novel, it's the 70s, not the 80s, but the novel was published after Philip K. Dick was dead in the 80s. It had an interesting history, which I'll answer that later. But I made it the 80s because it would have been too difficult to do it in the 70s. And since it's an alternate reality, it's not our reality, I didn't think that really changed much about it. And I liked the idea of 1984 and 1985. So, you know, there was no difficulty in being faithful because we did it at such a low budget. Doing something like Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said, there's no way to be totally faithful to the novel and get the movie made at the budget that it needs to be made at. And I won't be directing that because I just wouldn't be the right director for it, even though I wrote the script and will hopefully produce. And hopefully not too many more writers will come in on the script.
So how much you said was the budget?
The budget on this?
Yes.
We don't really say what the budget is because we will eventually, but you know, as a producer, my fee is $250,000, as are the other producers. So do you include that in the budget if we didn't pay ourselves or not? And when people like the composer, you know, pay $15,000 for an assistant, but we don't pay him, is that in the budget? So the budget's, you know, the amount of cash we made it with is very small, but, you know, we think it's the equivalent by virtue of the work that was put into it and the people involved. Robin Hitchcock gave us the music basically for free, 9 of his songs. You know, he would normally probably get $10,000, $20,000 per song for a movie. So is that in the budget or not? You know, you could have different budgets for different reasons. So it's really kind of meaningless unless you know the sort of the real story of the movie. In terms of the publication, Philip K. Dick wrote this novel. It was called Valis System A originally. Some of you may know that. And he sent it to his publisher. And there was a new editor who kind of freaked out that Philip K. Dick was getting religious and sent it back to him with notes. And Dick decided to ignore the notes, and he gave the manuscript with another title scribbled on it, Radio Free Albemuth, to his friend, science fiction writer Tim Powers. And he then proceeded to write an even more religious novel about Valis, but a totally different story, totally different characters, called Valis, that was published and is considered one of his masterpieces. And then after he died, Tim Powers came forth with the manuscript. And the family, he died with no will and with 5 ex-wives and 3 children, all from different wives, and they couldn't agree on anything, but they did agree on publishing Radio Free Albemuth. So for a number of years, it was the only Philip K. Dick novel you could buy in the United States, was Radio Free Albemuth, interestingly. And then we acquired the rights. It was done as a stage play also, but it was much more political, less kind of mystical. But to me, the mystical aspect was more interesting, or equally interesting. So that's how I balanced it.
The music, I think, should have been more mystical.
You what?
The music,
Yes.
the songs,
Yes?
should have been more like the messages from outer space.
The music should have been more like the messages from outer space.
Because after all, that was the point of the whole movie, right?
Right. Well, you know what? Make your movie. Everyone makes their own choices, right? I don't wear turtleneck sweaters. You know, it's very hard to make a movie. You make a movie and it turns out to be, it's like when you imagine falling in love with somebody and what your life will be like with that person. It's not what it turns out to be. It may be better, it may be worse, better in some ways, worse in other ways. It's a very collaborative medium, and you end up using what is there. It's a great learning curve. I don't mean to be negative about your question. I used songs that I thought were good for the movie. You know, I love Robin Hitchcock's music. I always thought that it was sort of the pop music equivalent of Philip K. Dick. And we were very lucky in that we were able to get to Robin through the actor Alan Rickman, who's a good friend of producer Elizabeth Carr, who, by the way, would have liked to have been here and arranged the whole festival, and did a lot of work with Alekos to make this possible. Yes?